Okay, at this time, we're going to go to 12.0, which is the superintendent's report. And I am going to turn it over to Dr. Greg Little, and I believe all of his items are for information only, board. There will not be any action items in 12.0.
So before we get to the meat of the report with Mr. Salters and the operations update, as well as some of the other things we're going to talk about tonight, I did want to add that yesterday and today has been very exciting for me because we have recognized the top 10 finalists for the Lexington 1 Teacher of the Year. And so we do a prize patrol kind of thing. Of course, our prize patrol is some cookies and a thing for their door, a door plaque. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But to see the excitement on their faces, on the kids' faces, and their principals' faces, we are truly blessed to have some amazing teachers here in Lexington 1, and we recognized them this week, which was really cool. That top 10 was pretty neat for the last couple of days. We are just a couple more days remaining until we go home for winter break, and we are excited about the new year and all the wonderful things that the new year is going to bring for Lexington 1. Also, finally, as Ms. Green talked about, or Ms. Smith talked about, Mr. Wooten being on the House Education Committee, I can report that Mr. Wooten has filed a school calendar flexibility bill, providing local school districts much more flexibility in creating their school calendar. And so we appreciate his support. He and I have been on the phone the last few days talking about what that looks like and things that would help our district. And so having some more flexibility, I think would also speak to some other issues that we could do some different things for our teachers and for our students, and create a calendar that more closely resembles what our values are, as opposed to having Horry County determine when we go to school, which I've always thought was unusual. So very excited.
Do you mind if I make a real quick comment about that? So, Chris Wooten represents part of our district, but there are a number of other representatives. And so now your job is where you live to contact your representative and get them on board. And then your family throughout the state, ask them to contact their representatives and senators, because this is very, very important for us. I mean, we need this flexibility so that we can make the decisions based on what's best for our local district.
Okay. Thank you very much. So if there's nothing else, without further ado, Mr. Salters, if you would provide us with an operations update, please.
Thank you, Will. And get that running, hopefully. There we go. I want to bring tonight to you images of our new middle school site, Beechwood Middle School, which is again located off of Highway 378 and at the corner of Beechwoods Drive. You see we've made some significant progress. In spite of all the rain we've had, we had another 3 inches of rain there this past weekend. Believe it or not, there are no significant trees right around the building, but we feel like it's in a rainforest. We're commenting on that today. It's just unbelievable the amount of rain we've had on this site. But construction is still progressing, and we're looking forward to an on-time completion, if not early completion, of the project. So you're looking at an aerial shot. 378 would be in the lower portion here. This is the main parking lot, and this will be your main driveway and student drop-off coming across here eventually. We've got our larger auditorium space here taking shape, and our gymnasium area here, office administration area over towards the center of the building. And you can see as we kind of progress around, you can see a lot of the masonry has been laid, and our roofs are being put in place. This is a shot from the back side of the building, our cafeteria space here. Very excited about that space, working with our food service department that was recognized earlier, and our student classroom wings here on the on this side of the building. 3 classroom wings, 2-story wings, and you notice a lot of clay and water around the site. It's become very difficult to get around, moving equipment around the site to work on the project, but they're continuing to press through that, and we're expecting more rain Thursday and Friday as well, so that'll slow us down for a little bit. This is a shot of the first classroom wing. These are actually the science labs on the end of the wing there. And this is a Nietzsche High product. It's a concrete-based product. It looks like a wood panel siding product, give a little contrast to the building. the front entry. This will be leading right into the secured foyer. As you know, in our new security designs, we'll have an intercom button here with a camera, and so anyone trying to get into the building will have to be announced at that point and then buzzed into the building and over into the main office. This is a shot into the media center, which eventually will have glass here and some doors going out into a courtyard. And this is a look from the second story looking out towards the front entry. So this is your main hallway, the front classroom wing, and then the lower hallway and a center commons area. Your main office is here at the front. And this is a shot looking down into the cafeteria space, very similar to what we have over at Meadow Glen Middle School with a small elevated platform for seating and or limited performances. Our serving lines are in the back. And then a shot at the front of the cafeteria. There'll be some hardscape here with some tables for outdoor seating for students during their lunch period. And this is a good shot of some of the site conditions we've been dealing with. You see all the water collecting here. Now these gentlemen are actually putting in some clips for the windows to start being mounted, which is very exciting. We get the building dried in. You can really start seeing some progress on the finishes on the inside once that happens in the next month. All the steam there is from some of the kettles related to the roofing that's going on in the gymnasium, so good progress there. And then this is just an upper shot of the what we call clear story that looks down into the center commons area of the building. So I'll be happy to answer any questions related to the site and the construction there.
Mr. Salters, just remind us again about the zoning for that school.
Yeah, so we're looking to bring to the board a recommendation for first reading in January for the zoning attendance lines for Beechwood, and then we will have a community input meetings at our respective schools that will be affected, and that would be Lexington Middle, Pleasant Hill Middle, and Meadow Glen Middle School. And we'll take feedback on the draft lines, and then I'll have a second reading in March, and then likely a second reading in February, and likely a third reading in March, and that would be for final action at that point, positioning us for opening the school in August of 2019.
Thank you.
And I did want to highlight for you tonight, if I can get the mouse, here we go, some additional opportunities we have now on our webpage. I'm going to have to transition here real quick, get this up.
We're all surfing the internet up here.
Okay, we have a newly formed page on our website, and it is accessible under About. And you're familiar with this link, About and Building Plan. This is where we hosted a lot of our information related to our building plan and the vote in the 2018 referendum. And so if the page will load. We have come out here to this page, and our communications department, in conjunction with our facility staff, have worked really hard to develop a site where our constituents can come out and check on the progress of every project in the building plan. And so by clicking on any one of these links, it will take you directly to the school, and then you'll see before photos, and they'll come up, and that's the entry there at the campus. And then you can see we're doing some secure entry upgrades, and then the anticipated start date for those upgrades. We're doing the design phase in 2019 January, You'll see a current photo as construction is started, and then you'll see a completed date.
That's
So-
great. That's impressive.
We'll have that available for each project in the building plan, and then also, of course, the new school sites as well. And so you'll be able to track the progress of any particular site, any particular school or site that you're interested in. And your computer will work better than this one, I'm sure, and this mouse. And you'll be able to navigate the page and go back and forth and see, the progress as we go. And so you can look out there now on all of these dates are anticipated start dates and are live and have been scheduled into the program. So if you have a question about a particular school or project at a school, you can take a look out here and see when the projects are planned to start. And when we say design phase, that's when we'll work with an architect to, actually do the design work, and then there'll be a contract negotiation phase and then a construction phase, and those will be updated accordingly.
Specific to the Beechwood project, how do we correlate with the construction timeline because of rain delays and those kind of things?
There have actually, I think there's been some 90 days of rain there, but actually we're still on schedule, and actually potentially may gain a little bit of time there. They've been able to really work well around the site with the site contractor to keep the water down and clay mitigated. So we're doing well. Other questions? All right, thank you.
If I can add, we are really excited about this as a good communication tool. We want to keep people up to date about what's happening with every project, and we recognize that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so that's why we want to have what the before photo is and what the current photo is, and we'll archive those photos as well throughout the process. And they'll be somewhere, you'll be able to reach them somewhere. Mary Beth, I'm trying to point at you. You'll be able to reach them somewhere on the site. You can just click on it, and then you can see all the different photos associated with that project. I think that's what the plan is. Yes?
We're working to.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's what we're working on. So we're trying to make it, we had a teacher actually from Lexington Middle School, as a matter of fact, who said we wanted to make it like Domino's Pizza, their website, about how you can track the pizza through the process. And so that's really what our goal is, as you can really track the progress of the project as we're going along. And so, and again, just to highlight, there also the years and stuff are built in, so you can see how the projects are built out over the 5-year period. When we talk to people about this, we remind people it is a 5-year building plan, which means there are certain things that everything can't be done in 2019. It has to be mapped out. And so they've done that, and nicely done with your team and Mary Beth and communications as well. That took a lot of collaboration, and very pleased and proud of both of you. That's good stuff. All right. Okay, so next we have, we good, Mr. Salters? All right, next we have a quick legislative update.
We do. I would like to take opportunity, though, to say that my staff's been incredible. That page has taken days and days and weeks and hours of work. And we've had some of the staff gathering photographs, but Lindsay Mitchell has led that page. And I told her I'd give her a free day off after everything she's done once it got finished, because she's been incredible, and we really do need to thank her. It's sort of like if you've ever done darkroom work, you thought you'd go into a darkroom, create a photograph, and you'd spend an hour. Well, that's the same way this kind of work is. You go in there thinking you're going to spend an hour, and it's a day later. So it's just really time intensive and takes lots of intelligence, and she's done a really great job. For the legislative update, Madam Chair, board members, and guests, I know this is a very full meeting, and I'll keep your first legislative update of the year pretty brief. But as you know by now, the legislature begins its regular session each time on the second Tuesday in January, which will be January 8th this year. The 2019 legislative session is the first year of the 2-year 123rd South Carolina General Assembly. So as you remember, they come in 2-year groupings. So something doesn't pass this year, it could be carried over into the second year. But at the end of the second year, if it doesn't pass, it's wiped clean. They have to start all over. So we're in that first year, so we're starting all over again. And so pre-filing of bills started this month of December. The Senate pre-filed almost 300 pieces of legislation on Wednesday, December 12th. And more than 37 of those involved, as you heard our teacher speak so eloquently about K-12 education. They involve school buses, year-round schools, teacher pay raises, the possible reduction of mandatory testing, expanding 4K full-day kindergarten opportunities, and so much more. Really important work is being introduced. House members pre-filed legislation today, and unfortunately, it's not accessible yet, or wasn't when we came down here, but it'll be online soon. We'll begin to track some of those bills and the ones that impact our district the most, and then we'll give you regular monthly updates. In the meantime, as you probably know, new board orientation's the only state-mandated training, although board members earn points for participating in statewide conferences and on-site training in their district. And at the School Board Association, as part of that, on Tuesday, December 4th, we held the new board members training session as required by South Carolina Code of Laws, Section 59, 1945. Dr. Tiffany Richardson, who's General Counsel and Director of Policy and Legal Services for the South Carolina School Boards Association, presented Boardsmanship 101 presentation that was very thorough and very interactive and pretty entertaining. So right after that, the School Boards Association held its annual legislative conference, which many of you went to December 7th through the 9th. And so I'm sure you have thoughts you'd like to share from that, and we will do that in January at the January board meeting. Our new board members will also head off to the South Carolina School Board Association's February 21st new board orientation training that's required with them. So we're staying pretty active already in a brand new legislative year.
Any questions for Ms. Hill? All right. Now, this next part, we're going to move on to a strategic plan update. And this is something that I'm just going to tell you I'm incredibly excited about. Yeah. So about October of last year, so about 14 months ago, I guess, we began the strategic planning process. And we sent a group to Ed Leader 21. We started to engage the board in conversations about what they wanted a strategic plan to look like. We started to have conversations with our community from that point forward about power skills, about what we asked the board about really we wanted to capture the vision and direction of the board. We talked to our community about what skills and dispositions we wanted our students to have when they graduated. And we came up with this strategic plan that is a little different. I just want to remind you, it's a little different than what's been done in the past. It is a 3-year strategic plan, not a 5-year strategic plan. The idea, and Mr. Poole, am I stepping on information? I'm just trying to do a brief update. It's a 3-year strategic plan as opposed to a 5-year strategic plan. The thinking is that a 5-year strategic plan is really too slow and cumbersome to handle the rapid rate of change that we see in schools. We decided to make system commitments and promises to our community. We'll talk about those system commitments tonight. Of course, we adopted a new vision, empower each child to design the future, as well as a new vision that talked about extraordinary, a caring community and extraordinary collaborators, creators, critical thinkers, etc. And we have worked really hard over the last few months to advance that strategic plan. So one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we did is that we did progress checks on the strategic plan. We don't want you hearing about the strategic plan in August and then hearing about it again in May. That's not really what our goal is. And so the hurricanes, I think, messed us up one time. It kind of got us off schedule in terms of providing a progress update. So what we wanted to do was to do the state of the strategic plan in December, and we will do this a couple more times before the end of the year. and to show you what we've been working on. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Poole, Mr. Bowers, and Dr. Phillips.
Thank you, Dr. Little, members of the board, Madam Chair. We appreciate your time tonight, and we're going to try to kind of talk through where we are currently. We spent last year, as Dr. Little stated, crafting a plan in a way that we hadn't done before, with a lot of guidance and a lot of expertise from a lot of different resources, but really thinking boldly about what it means to plan for a future that changes so rapidly. And so in that 3-year strategic plan, we needed to start with that vision statement that was bold, that was memorable, that really meant something to the teachers, the administrators, the students, the parents, and the community, that they could hold on to and get excited about. And we feel like, based on where we are this fall, from the conversations that we're hearing, the fact that we hear the vision stated as a reference to why we do the work we do at a classroom level or at a school level means that we kind of hit the mark with this, that it resonates with people in a lot of different ways, but it's broad enough to really drive us forward with kind of the motivation. The mission piece behind the vision was our efforts to say, so what does that really look like? We know that ultimately we want to empower our students to design the future, not just their individual future, but collectively the future for all of us, because if not them, who? And so they can do it. But what does that look like when you walk into a classroom? So we added the mission statement to really put hands and feet to that vision, to say we want to see not some students, but all students, in all capitals, demonstrating certain skills on a regular basis. And we heard over and over and over from our stakeholders that the family feel, the caring aspects of Lexington County were something that were valued, and that had to be a part of what we saw in our schools. And you see that in the system commitments as well. So the vision and the mission, in my experience in Lexington 1 and in different school districts, has taken hold in a really palpable way across our system. And you hear the language on a regular basis. You hear it as benchmarks around the behaviors, the teaching, the assessment that we see in classes. So we're feeling good about that becoming part of a common language for us, and that's what we've back from district administrators and teachers as well. So as Dr. Little stated, we didn't want to build a strategic plan around just numbers to check off on a list. We wanted to build a plan that kind of committed to promises we make to our students, promises we make to our community, our business partners, and really our vision for our state and what we're trying to do. So we started with commitment 1, which is about preparing all students to be successful at the next level with the skills that they need. And that can be a reading level in pre-K, and that can be a readiness to walk into the workforce with the power skills ready to demonstrate what you need. But the challenge is always to look back at that student in class and say, is this student ready for what he needs or she needs in math, language arts, world language, et cetera. That's commitment 1, and it's been a nice measure for us to go along and check our progress and check our actions. Commitment 2 is about tapping into the idea that memorization of traditional academic skills are not necessarily what the workforce needs, and equal to those academic skills are something that we don't even refer to as soft skills anymore. These are power skills because they're essential, and we talked about it before as we developed, that if you can write an algorithm for it, then it's probably not necessary to teach it to a student, because they're going to need something else in the workforce. Those power skills that our community identified are listed here, and there are 8 in particular. So each school is kind of gauging their progress towards these. Some are easier at some sites than others, but it's interesting to watch it develop, and it's been a really interesting fall watching these conversations come about. Like what does accountability look like for a second grader versus a senior? What does integrity look like in terms of participation in a group project, or academic honesty and how do you have those conversations, because they really are happening in our school system. Commitment 3 is all about that piece that it's not just inside our four walls of the building. Our students benefit from tremendous partnerships in the community. Our foundation is a great example of that. So we ask schools to measure their progress in their communication, both from the customer service you receive at the front desk or a phone call, all the way to how are they reaching out to opportunities in work-based learning, et cetera, from community partnerships. And again, we're seeing a really nice baseline as we start this plan. Commitment 4 is about equipping our adults within our system. Not only equipping them with what they need to be successful, but we wanted to ensure this last piece, to equip them to be successful in order to advocate and ensure the success of all students. So that's, again, something we come back to when we're making decisions, and we're starting in January some really interesting and different kind of resource allocation discussions as we enter HR season and budget season about this commitment. So in addition to those commitments, our strategic plan has 2 strategic portfolios, which are high leverage strategies to say there are some students who need a really different approach. And we've seen Project Hope come together with aspects of how we address mental wellness, how we address the way we serve students on sort of a rehabilitation path, and how we manage our procedures in-house and work students to transition effectively within our school system. The other piece, a different kind of future requires a different kind of leadership. So we've invested time, energy into really thinking about what does the school leader of the future need, and that means principals, assistant principals, teacher leaders, student leaders. So it's a constant conversation about investing in really thinking and reflecting on what leaders need to be in Lexington 1, and we've seen some huge gains in just the conversations that we have about what it means to be a leader. So I'm talking really fast. If you guys have any questions, feel free to stop me. So when we put this plan into place, a whole lot of people collaborated over a year, and our school board was part of those conversations. And then it became time it got approved and approved by the state, and the state said, wow, we've never seen a plan quite like this, but we like it. And so now it's time to make it come to life. And this funnel is sort of the idea that, so you take that broad vision and how do you make it reality for a second grader? How do you make it reality for a junior or a senior? And that district vision, so then we measure kind of through the mission, are we seeing collaboration? Are we seeing caring communities that are fostering relationships with kids? Do those turn into then a place where we can say, yeah, we're meeting the promises of those 4 commitments? Within that, we have specific performance goals, 6 performance goals, where we can kind of measure along the way. And in order to achieve those performance goals that are inside the plan, we have specific action steps. And those action steps get into things like establishing leadership standards, or putting certain models for personalization into classroom instruction. And then that's kind of what we're gauging as we go out and supporting in the classroom. So that's how the strategic plan sort of looks, with those strategic portfolios, Project Hope and leadership development alongside them. So what we have been talking about most recently, within those performance goals, there was one action step that lived across all 5 of the first 5 performance goals. And that action step revolved around a different sort of accountability meeting at the school. So we asked each school across the system, 31 sites, because that includes the alternative school and LTC, to come together and talk about their students and their commitments in kind of a really public way. And everybody across the system was having data meetings and assessing progress along in the past. But with this strategic plan, we asked schools to do it in a more uniform way, to hold themselves accountable to those promises that we've made, and to talk through the promises with the faces and names of kids. So are students advancing on time with the skills they need to be successful? Well, yes, they are, except in this grade level. and these are the kids who are showing that they need more support. Or here are the kids that are demonstrating power skills, but they're demonstrating them in these like 4 power skills, but these 4 we're not seeing as much. So what are we going to do about that next? And that's what these meetings became. They became the life in the faces of those commitments, to talk about them not in the abstract, but in the reality of real kids. So from those meetings, in addition to other data sources, we've been collecting, so where are we, this baseline for the fall, so we can start to make decisions about what's next over the next 3 years. And we've done that through school support meetings, dashboard analysis, which Dr. Phillips' office puts together these incredible dashboards to look at different data points in different ways. We've done this. Each principal has developed an individual professional learning goal where they're learning how their own leadership impacts student learning in different ways, and talking about, so does this dimension of my leadership help me, or does it hinder me, or what? And they get coached along the way with that. We do activity audits in instructional services in a different way than we've done in the past, to look at all the members of instructional services and say, so your time is being spent here, but let's think about shifting over to this spot for now, and then we can shift back. We do learning walks through schools to look for things like power skills, to look for things like learning targets in the classroom, to look for different aspects of instructional programming. And then we have a system called Classroom Mosaic that administrators can use to kind of document trends around teaching. How often do we see certain types of questioning happening? Is that different at different levels? Is it different across feeder patterns? So we can look at those trends. So we've been collecting data, and Dr. Phillips is going to share with you some of the big trends that we've been seeing up to this point that are going to move us forward. Thank you.
Okay, so as Mr. Poole said, the data we received from the schools, the school teams that went out to these school meetings took copious amounts of notes, took those notes and brought them back to instructional services, kind of compiled them all together, and then took them out and conducted a text analysis on them to try to determine what trends were emerging from those conversations system-wide. We also then provided, how we were going to support each of those schools on those focus areas and areas of need, and turn that back around to the schools as part of that reciprocal accountability that we're promising them through these meetings. From those meetings, we saw several themes arise. So I'm going to go through those relatively quickly here, but please stop me if you have any questions. First and foremost, the theme that came out of all of the focus areas and the areas of need within these schools, or among these schools, was the fact that ELA and math are and continue to be a focus. Specifically, schools talked a lot about implementing the workshop model in ELA and math, acquiring and using instructional coaches, using model classrooms as professional learning venues, and then combating those learning gaps within the subgroups that we have seen throughout our district.
Could you do us a favor and define model classrooms, because that's very new for us?
Sure, I think I can.
Oh, are you doing that, Van? All right, okay. Good deal.
I don't want to get it wrong. All right. Secondly, we saw that there were concerns system-wide about students in RTI, those kids who aren't achieving as well as they could, students with disabilities, and our English language learners. Yes.
Can you define all of those in acronyms? Because we have a lot of newbies up here that might not know all of them.
RTI is response to intervention. It is a way to take students who are performing at the lowest levels and in a tiered fashion bring them up to speed within their grade level. And of course, students with disabilities, there are a variety of those sorts of disabilities that are among our students. And then English language learners are those students who don't speak English as their native language. And so we have to provide supports for them throughout their educational experience until they reach the point where they are proficient. So among those students, one of the things that was continually brought up was push-in services. And so to clarify that a little bit, typically speaking, in all of those areas, RTI, students with disabilities, and English language learners, very often those are pull-out programs where those students are removed from individual classrooms to a support sort of person who provides them their supports in that area, and then they stick them back in the classroom. One of the things that we're moving toward now is more push-in services where you're taking the interventionist, the special education teacher, or the ELL teacher and pushing them in as an additional teacher within the regular ed classroom so that they can provide those supports within there, within the normal educational environment. Another thing that came up was communication among all those special sorts of educators, the special ed teachers, the RTI teachers, and the general ed teachers. So making sure they're communicating and talking about what the needs of each of those individual students are and talking about the best ways to address those needs. And then there was also expressed a general need for additional interventionists and English language learners teachers. And I used a different acronym here, so I apologize. We're full of them. ELL and ESOL are the same. So ELL is English language learner, and ESOL is English for speakers of other languages. So next was system-wide concerns about student mental health and engagement. Student behaviors were discussed a good bit, specifically in elementary schools. Student engagement is with the new report card, which exciting, we'll get to talk about later, is becoming more of an issue because of one of the indicators on that report card, student attendance, and the acquisition and use of mental health professionals in the schools, making sure that we have those trained professionals that can come in and help us deal with some of the mental health issues that we're seeing arising in our schools.
Here.
Yes.
I just want to thank Human Resources. I know they've really been working hard to hire some new psychologists, and I think that's great for every aspect of our school, so thank you for that.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Poole and Mr. Bowers so they can talk some about their big wins and how they're going to continue the work.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. We're about to wrap up, but we did want to tell you we have uncovered a lot of information working with schools this fall and getting kind of really deeply into classrooms and from the lens of the strategic plan, seeing where we're progressing and seeing where the work is going to require more attention and time. The big wins at the secondary level, and I work mostly or exclusively with the middle and high schools and our dual enrollment programs. The school support meetings that I mentioned, when we asked schools to kind of come to a more uniform approach to addressing their data, have been a really big win for us across the system. And we're seeing conversations evolve in just the way collaboration happens across our system from the schools. And that collaboration is really now taking the shape of faces and names of students. So we're not talking about what schools need. We're talking about what specific students need. And that's a positive for us that we were hoping would come out of this strategic plan, and we've seen it really emerge. The implementation of instructional models for reading and mathematics. And this isn't an implementation of an initiative. It's a shift to instruction that doesn't rely on sort of a mass understanding. It's really intentional about ensuring touching every child and checking for understanding for every child. And there are strategies that we're helping or trying to work into schools to help teachers know when a student's not grasping what they need to within a particular content. The professional learning that we've been able to see happening across schools is around things like collective inquiry. So teachers are getting together and moving through inquiry cycles about identifying specific problems and trying strategies and really developing theories. If we as a group of teachers try this strategy, are we going to see different outcomes? And we see that professional learning developing this collective efficacy and impact among teachers, and it's a different kind of learning for us. So that's been a big win in the secondary schools. We're having conversations about why aren't all kids in certain classes, and what can we do to make every child know that every possibility and pathway is open for them. And we're starting to see those conversations turn into enrollments and things like dual enrollment, AP classes, which both enrollments in both of those have increased. And that focus on all students. We're going to talk about some very serious concerns about the new report card system, and certainly we have those concerns. But it does allow us to kind of say, so who's being left behind in our system, either from that data source or other data sources, and really identifying it's not about getting just enough, like 85% of our kids. It's about who are we not getting and why not. So that's been a conversation that's a big win from this strategic plan from this fall. Continuing to work the power skill development. We've got such a greater baseline than we kind of thought in this area. It's happening everywhere at every school. We want to get more systematic about it. So how do we measure it? How do we encourage it? How do we grow it and make it a part of the learning? Systematic interventions. So we're intervening on behalf of students, but how do we get that to be much more systematic so that we know we're not missing kids? So we're pretty good at it now, but we can get better, and that's going to be part of our challenge and our work going forward. Continuing to push accelerated coursework, and that's tough. Rigor is tough, and signing up for the hardest classes possible is kind of a hard sell sometimes, but we want kids in relevant, rigorous coursework, and we want to push them, and we want to support them in that. So what does it look like to get people in a course and say, I know you've never tried this level of courses, but we're with you, and we're going to support your success in it. And then distributed leadership. Mary Gaskins and her team around leadership development are really talking about what leadership means across our system, and we're seeing that, and we've got to continue that work because, what would it be like to have like 5, 10, and amplify the number of kind of creative minds working on solution finding across schools for our system. So that's where we're going to continue to charge forward based on what we see right now. And that's kind of the state of secondary. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Bowers, and he's going to let us know about elementary and kind of close us out. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm the last leg here of this presentation, so hopefully we can wrap this up fairly quickly. Big wins at the elementary level. First of all, we have to say that our school support meetings have been a huge success. 17 elementary schools. We had teams from Central Services go out and have these school support meetings. We heard at the direct student level conversations, and that's what we wanted to hear. We wanted to hear how schools were focusing on the system commitments, and we also wanted to hear how Central Services could be of benefit and support to the schools. And so our principals feel that that is certainly a huge win for us this fall. What we picked up from those meetings was that we certainly do have an intense focus on ELA and math, and primarily one thing that we've changed, and I want to get into the model classrooms, but we've taken a new approach to our professional learning in terms of ELA and math. And we just to break it down in simple terms, we stopped telling teachers how to do the workshop model. Now we're showing them. So through this process of having model classrooms, we have these dispersed throughout the district, and our goal is to have one in every single school. But we have highly skilled teachers in the workshop model, and then we send other teachers to go in and view these lessons. We have a briefing with the teachers before they go. We let them know what they're going to see. They go in and view. Then we have a debrief. And so then we take that a step further in that we have lab sites throughout our schools as well, where we let the teachers themselves go in, set a goal for themselves, go in and actually practice with students, and then have trained coaches coaching them side by side. And our teachers just rave about this. And we're seeing tremendous results from this kind of professional learning. And we're also moving that into the math as well. We don't have as many model classrooms in math, but we're definitely working in that direction.
I'd like to speak, if I can add.
Sure.
So one of the great flaws of professional learning is that you go to a workshop, say in July or June even, and then 6 or 8 weeks pass and you've not practiced it. Well, it's kind of like any skill. If you don't practice it once you learn it, you tend to lose it. And so what then is actually implemented with kids sometimes can be either a watered down version, or you could see that there could be any kinds of problems with that. So what I love about the model classroom and lab sites specifically is all of that revolves around students and the teachers' interactions with kids. And that really is a next level learning experience for our teachers. And I think it speaks to, we have one of our model classrooms, I believe, in Pillion, at Pillion Elementary School, and teachers are lining up to get down there to see this teacher at work. And so it's really exciting that you're walking in and seeing kids in action. You're not talking about this theoretical construct. You're talking about what's actually happening in front of you and its impact on children, and then allowing you to practice and see it and get immediate feedback. So those are all, I think, incredibly important attributes of both the model classroom and the lab sites together. That's really great work.
Right. And so definitely, if you speak to any of our teachers about this professional learning, they're going to tell you, we love it. Keep it coming. So,
Mr. Bowers,
yes,
if I
sir.
may ask, school support meetings, who participates in that?
Well, the principal and the leadership team there at the school, typically that's the assistant principals, teachers, usually the school psychologists, interventionists, coaches, their leadership team, along with staff from central services. So we bring out someone from instruction. So I go to most of the elementary schools. If I don't get there, then Dr. Talley will be there. And then we also have representatives sometimes from special services or HR or ESOL. We had meetings with the schools in the summer to kind of gauge who they wanted to come to those meetings, because we're trying to be more personable in terms of delivering on the school-specific needs. So after we have the first meeting, we may adjust that. So the team that goes out to the support meetings may not be the same every time. It depends on the needs of the school.
Okay.
So, yes, sir.
I was just going to say, you know, from the 10,000-foot view, again, as we continue to work on teachers' pay, we also need to continue working on that value proposition as a teacher. And again, nothing motivates a teacher more than seeing their child move from A to B. And so the better we can provide them tools and standardize so that they can see that effective change, I think the easier it'll be for us to retain teachers and recruit them as we go into this next hiring season. So I'm just saying thank you.
Yes, sir. So that describes our meaningful professional learning, but I would take that a few steps further in the fact that it's not only meaningful professional learning for the teachers, but we're also giving very meaningful learning to coaches, to our principals, our assistant principals through our leadership development program. Mr. Poole and I coach those principals side by side on various coaching visits throughout the year. We sit down with them, develop goals. We analyze their data resources. We develop goals and strategies to address their learning needs at each individual school. So,
Mr. Bowers, can I
yes.
just say,
Yes.
to hear that you coach the principals, I think that's just so awesome because, you know, historically it's basically, here's the keys, good luck, we'll see you later. I mean, really, I think that is so valuable to invest in the principals and help them to continue to grow and be deep into this system, I think that really is building that, that structure within, getting them, you know,
Right.
on the same page and able to really implement everything that you're talking about.
Well, everyone appreciates a coaching situation and where you have someone side by side in the moment, working through situations, and it's been very successful.
That's great.
So we certainly appreciate the opportunity for doing that, because that's something we really love. Also, culture at the elementary school. We all know that culture, relationships, and we heard from our community, and we also heard from the board that character education is something that we, we want to make sure that we have at the forefront. At the elementary level, we have been working on character ed, leadership development for quite some time. We have several of our schools that have already implemented frameworks for this, such as Leader in Me, Energy Bus, Lifelong Skills, Lifelong Guidelines. We have many programs that do that throughout the district. And so we will continue with that work. The other thing that we heard loud and clear is the value of mentoring at the elementary level. And our elementary schools have some outstanding mentor programs going on. So anybody that's interested in being a mentor, go out to any of our elementary schools. They would love to have you. Reading buddies, mentors, it's just a wonderful way to be involved in the schools. And then again, as Mr. Poole said, our focus on all students and making sure that we are taking a good close look at our disproportionate outcomes in terms of student learning, and that we sit down and we strategize on how to fix that. As we think about continuing our work at the elementary level, we do have some concerns over behavior. We see students with emotional difficulties, kids that have suffered from trauma that come in and just have a very difficult time adjusting to school. And of course, students with mental health issues. And so we certainly appreciate the work that Mr. Caldwell, Mr. Pender are doing with Project Hope and helping us get mental health professionals in the schools.
So our rates of anxiety and depression are actually, for the first time, actually outpacing ADHD. And so as I meet with insurance companies and we discuss this, they're seeing the exact same thing statewide and even nationally. And so, you know, that kind of identification, teaching, support, those things don't come in the classroom for teachers as they're coming up through their coursework. So what kind of discussions have y'all had regarding ongoing professional development for teachers to help identify, you know, that kid who is suffering toxic stress, or, you know, how does the strategic plan kind of address that?
Well, I would yield to Mr. Caldwell in terms of Project Hope and the things that he's doing there, but I will tell you that at the elementary level, this is something that we're going to have to continue with our work. We're in the preliminary stages of trying to figure out, you know, other than having the mental health professionals to come in and help us, you're correct. We don't have the strategies to do those kinds of things, and we're on a mission to learn and seek help from mental health professionals to help us deal with those sorts of things, because all of those issues in terms of anxiety and trauma and mental health are definitely on the rise. So we see what you're seeing at the school level. So, Mr. Caldwell, is there anything else you want to add to that?
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. I will say that at this point, we would hope to have hired 7, because our goal this year was to hire 7 mental health counselors and 7 more next year. We would have done that, but the 2 that we had for the 4 Pillion schools unfortunately declined our offer. One was related directly to pay. I'm not sure what the other reason was, but as of right now, we have counselors at Gilbert Middle and Gilbert High School. They split Carolina Springs Elementary, Carolina Springs Middle, and Alternative Educational Services. One for White Knoll High School exclusively. One that splits between Saxe-Gotha and Red Bank Elementary, and one between White Knoll Elementary and White Knoll Middle. And it's my understanding that there were interviews held last Thursday and Friday for the two Pillion, because there'll be a Pillion Elementary, Forts Pond Elementary, and a Pillion Middle, Pillion High counselor. And I think they interviewed for those this past week. I don't know the status of that. So to your point, Dr. Guyton, you're right. We're probably not equipped as we should be for our teachers to identify and address. And so we hope that through this agreement with Lexington County Mental Health and with the counselors in our buildings, they will help us identify those issues. And by this time next year, we should have a mental health counselor at least part-time at every one of our sites.
Excellent.
So that's definitely something that we will continue with that sort of work. The other things that we're going to continue with is looking for resources for our gifted learners, students that are considered to be gifted. We want to see academic improvement from them as well. You know, they're scoring high, but we want to see that improvement. And so we're going to take a good look at what we're doing with those gifted learners. And then, as Mr. Poole said earlier, the strategic interventions, making sure that RTI and special services and ESOL are all in a collaborative effort, and that we're streamlining our efforts to support students. So we're going to continue to work in that direction. So just talking with our principals about the strategic plan and asking them to just give us some thoughts about how they view the strategic plan. I thought this one summed it up. This was from Will Moody, who is new to our district this year. He's the principal at Gilbert Primary School. And so I think that sums it up right there. And I can say from personal experience, I know Mr. Oswald could probably say the same thing. I've been here for 25 years, and I know he was here longer than that, that this strategic plan has a different feel to it. And it gives us a real common language, and everybody's focused on it, and we talk about it all the time. And so we're just really are proud of it, proud of the work that we've done. And then moving forward in next steps, we're going to have a meeting in January once we come back from winter break of central services staff only. And to my knowledge, we haven't had this sort of meeting before. And we're going to examine, before we get into the heat of the budget, how we support our schools. And we have all sorts of information that we haven't had at our fingertips before. And so we certainly, you know, are not making any promises about what we're going to be able to do, because, of course, Mr. Butler would tell us we only have so much money. And it's not all about money, but we need to think about the money that we do have and how we allocate it and how we allocate our personnel, knowing what the schools have told us that they need to get the work done. So that's our next steps.
Sounds like each of the schools are going to have metrics as we move through this plan. So again,
Yes.
we need to focus
Sure.
on central services and what are the expectations and the metrics and the how do we define success. So.
Right.
And I'd like to say, so Mr. Bowers and Mr. Poole both, you talked about how you're looking at individual students, names and faces.
Yeah.
And, we're in a district that's over 26,000 students now. We're growing. So to hear that our focus is, addressing the needs of individual students, it's perfectly fine for our buildings to have a prototype, but children, you don't have a prototype for children. That diminishes the product rather than improving the efficiency. And so I'm so glad to hear that is such a part of how this strategic plan is being operationalized. I think that's so important.
Right. Thank you.
So again, 14 months ago, we talked about, I made a promise to the board that the strategic plan would not sit on a shelf. And it's not. It's not going to just look good on the website. It's not going to collect dust on the shelf. We're going to work hard at it. And our goal is not, it's about moving forward. And you're going to see there are some things that we don't do as well as others. And that's why we have the plan in front of us to continue to make that forward progress, even when we're not doing well in something, so that we can talk about it. We can plan, we can, drop back and then move forward again. And so we're very excited about the plan. As you can tell, there's a lot going on, and we're going to continue to work hard at it. But I would like to take just a second. Thank you three very much again. This is a wonderful presentation about where we are. It's a lot of work, and they put that together pretty quickly overall. And we will be providing another progress report in, it's going to be March, and then we'll do another one, I believe, in May or June, right? So we've got 2 more scheduled for next semester. So lots of information coming.
Well, and the challenge of a 3-year strategic plan is that by June, we'll be almost a third of the way through the 3 years.
That's correct.
So, I mean, really, you're running fast. And
We have to be nimble. That's the
Yes.
idea. And so speaking of the strategic plan, so this actually worked out really well for us because the report cards, I wanted to do the strategic plan first so that you could have some context about how we are approaching progress on the report cards as well. And I think you're going to see that what we need to work on in our report cards are really aligned already in our strategic plan, which is really good planning for the district. So Dr. Phillips, and we're also going to talk about, I believe, some concerns that we have with some of the calculations. As a former president said, I believe fuzzy math was the word, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Little, thank you. I am going to talk briefly tonight about the school report cards that were recently released. Just for those of you who are new to us, I'm going to kind of recap a few things and kind of bring you up to speed on the timeline. On October 12th, the State Department released an embargoed report card for us to review. And we had until October 25th to conduct that review, with a public release scheduled for November 15th. So during that time, between October 12th and November 12th, a lot of people, particularly people in my position in districts around the state, found a variety of problems, and there were lots of them. But here were some of the bigger concerns. There were questions about the student progress metric, that way that they're measuring student growth. There were issues with the metric that they're calling school quality, which was based off of a student engagement survey given to all students in April, May-ish last year. There were various inconsistencies in data that was reported on the report card, not necessarily rated, but reported, and that included things like teachers, the number of certified teachers in schools, and the way that discipline was being reported, those kinds of things. Also, the use of our formative assessment data on a summative report card. And they also were calculating graduation rate points incorrectly based on what was written in the Education Oversight Committee's accountability manual. And there were a laundry list of other things that came up here and there. But the folks around the district found those concerns, and then on November 12th, in response to a lot of the emails and calls and things that the State Department was getting from folks around the state, they delayed that release. And they delayed it until November 29th. They reopened the review, and then we went back to looking at it and seeing if we could make sure that those problems were fixed. Different roundtable groups, the Testing and Accountability Roundtable, the Superintendent's Roundtable, Instructional Leaders Roundtable, all met and provided feedback to the State Department and the Education Oversight Committee about the issues that they found in the report card. They made an effort to fix them, and then on November 29th, those report cards were released. So many of you on this board have seen this. For those of you who haven't, this is kind of how the points were distributed. So you had academic achievement, which was ELA and math. Preparing for success was student achievement on science and social studies. And these are this one was based off of SC Ready for elementary and middle schools, and this one was based off of SC Pass for elementary and middle schools. This one was based off of Algebra 1 and English 1 end of course tests for high schools, and Biology 1 and U.S. History end of course tests for high schools here. Student progress was a measure of growth on ELA and math from one year to the next. And this is sort of a point of contention that we can talk about in a little bit later. School quality was that student engagement survey. English learners' progress toward proficiency. This was those ELL learners that we were talking about earlier. They had to show certain amounts of growth toward being deemed proficient in the English language in order to get points on that. Graduation rate is exactly what it sounds like. And then college and career readiness is based off of a variety of metrics that can be included to count a child as college and career ready. Something to note, I mean, with all the talk in legislature about the potential reduction of state testing and mandatory testing, you'll note that at the elementary and middle level, about 90% of these metrics are based off of standardized tests. And at the high school level, 70% are based off of standardized tests. So just think about that for a little bit if they're going to reduce it. Each school was rated based on a point system, a 100-point system, and they were given a rating of excellent, good, average, below average, or unsatisfactory. Okay, so the way that these ratings were determined was they looked back at the 2015 National Assessment for Educational Progress for South Carolina in reading and math, and they tried to align the percent for this year only, the percent of schools excellent and good to that percent proficient and advanced on that NAEP test, the average to the basic, and the below average to the unsatisfactory. Below average and unsatisfactory to the below basic.
The NAEP test is the one that's given to a random sample, right?
It's given to a random sample at different grades each year. We do tend to get randomly sampled quite a bit. And it's different subjects in different years, and sometimes they do a real hard focus on math and science, but this was the one they opted to use for this. And again, I say this is for this year only because they're taking whatever this top 15% was this year and making whatever the lowest score of those schools was the cut point for now for the next 3 to 5 years. And so likewise for each of those other levels. So as it stands this year, 15% of schools in the state are excellent, 20% are good, 35% are average, 20% are below average, and 10% are unsatisfactory. In Lexington 1, this is how we fared. We had 7 schools come out as excellent, which is a quarter of our schools. 28.6%, or 8 schools, came out good. 10 schools came out average, that's 35, almost 36%. 2 schools were below average, and 1 school was unsatisfactory. So, we continue to have some concerns about the report card, and it's very important that we talk about these concerns because when we're making these decisions about the strategic plan, we need to make sure that we're basing those conversations and any decisions we make on good data that is a good metric of our success or lack of success. So the first concern we have, they called that student engagement survey a measure of school quality. All right, so It is what's called a competitive metric. So a competitive metric means that they take all of the schools and they were looking at the percent of students who scored committed, which in short means the kids like to come to school, want to come to school, and are engaged while they're there. Okay, they took all of those percent committed and they ranked them from best to worst. And then they created percentiles out of that, and certain percentile became a certain amount of points. So the way this worked out was you could have well over half of your students scoring committed and be unsatisfactory. Okay? So you're, instead of competing against a benchmark, so for example, if you said, well, if you're less than 30% committed, we're going to call that unsatisfactory because, you know, only a third of your kids are committed. They're saying, well, your score is not as good as this school up here, even though well over half of your kids are engaged in the learning, you're still unsatisfactory. So we have a problem with that metric. Secondly, the growth measure, the way it is constructed, makes it difficult for high-achieving schools to achieve growth. It also is a little bit of a moving target in such a way that you can actually demonstrate growth but still lose points. And so, you know, we're talking some about this with the State Department and about how that seems to disadvantage certain schools. Third, the overall point system, the 100-point system, is structured so that it is almost impossible for any school to achieve all points. And as we mentioned before, there is very much an over-reliance on standardized testing. There's one portion of this report card, the college and career readiness measure, which allows a student a variety of ways to achieve that measure. So when we talk about that profile of a South Carolina graduate that talks about multiple pathways and talks about demonstrating those sort of important power skills, this is the one sort of, to me, bright spot of this report card, in that a kid can reach that by taking a test or doing a work-based learning experience or receiving a certification from LTC. Variety of different ways that they can achieve that. Everything else is based, at least in some fashion, on a standardized test. So moving forward, while we don't agree with everything that the report card shows us, we do have it as a baseline. And like any other piece of data, we use that piece of data along with other pieces of data to help us guide our decisions and our conversations. And from these data and from the data that we've collected around the district in a variety of other ways, we know that we have a couple of pretty good sized needs. We want to look at middle school performance for all of our middle schools and look at those structures and the way we're structuring time, space, and place for those schools, and see if we can't get better performance out of that. And then also, district-wide, we want to look at how are we moving kids, how are we addressing those needs of each individual kid so that they're moving forward and so that we can address that growth piece.
Was the middle school opportunity for us more the absolute performance or the relative growth compared to other middle school students in other districts?
It was growth that was our killer on that one. Our achievement was average to above average and good on all of our middle schools, pretty much. But the growth was the one thing.
Could that be because our current middle schoolers are the ones that were part of this, experienced several different tests? I mean, because they were
that could
part
be
of
for everybody, right?
Yeah, one of the things we are, in fact, I'm looking at Dr. Talley, but Mr. Poole and I have had this conversation. We're going to really look at fundamentally some of the structural changes some possible changes to our middle school schedule. We have some concerns about the length of the class periods. We have concerns just about some overall schedule pieces that we're going to have conversations about. I don't want to make any promises here in an open meeting when we haven't had the in-depth conversations, because we've really spent the last few weeks breaking down what this looks like to give us some movement forward. But we will be spending large portions of the spring semester talking about the lessons that we can learn, because we look at this as a continuous improvement process. No matter how good we are, we can always get better, and this is certainly part of what we're going to be working on.
Okay, so I'll answer any further questions you guys have.
Well, I want to say one thing I'm pleased with is that Dr. Little has a middle school background.
I do, yes.
So that's going to be a plus for us as we move forward on figuring this out.
Middle school is a passion of mine, so it's good to see that we're going to be working on that.
And I'm happy to say I have one semester left in middle school, so. It's a fun time.
Thank y'all for all
Yeah, thank you.
So again, I apologize for the lateness of the hour, but those were three major things we had to take a look at. Dr. Talley, I believe you have some first reads to just let us know about.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Little. I am tonight bringing to the board's attention for first reading policy IHBA, Special Education Programs for Handicapped Disabled Students. This is a policy that needs to be recodified because of new legislation that was put into play last year to offer a state-recognized employability credential for certain students with disabilities for whom such a credential is appropriate. I see Dr. Power shaking his head. This is long time overdue.
Yeah, that's great.
Our special ed department has spent a lot of time advising the state on this work and on what we would do in Lexington 1 to make it viable for our students. I've included also in your packet the components and the criteria that would establish this program for our students, and also I've included a listing of courses that we would offer, and it should be no surprise to you, we're a little bit ahead of the game. We offer occupational programs in the past, and we'll just be tweaking those a little bit. So if you would very carefully, I'm speaking particularly to the new board members, the way this works, if you would very carefully, and the former board members too, to read this with a fine-tooth comb. If you have any questions before January board meeting, please give me a call or shoot me an email. I'll be happy to answer your questions. When we come back in January, I'll be seeking approval on this policy. Happy to answer any questions.
And then correct me if I'm wrong, but we want to make the corrections between the two such that when we come back in January, the revisions are.
That's right. What I've done, the text in red are our changes. And you'll see the reg is all in red because it's new, but the policy just has some red text.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Talley, and thank you, Dr. Little. Though both of those policies and that administrative rule are exciting. We were fortunate when we were holding our meetings about the bond referendum, we had a parent tell us about the education her child got at one of our high schools, and it actually helped him get a job. I mean, she brought tears to your eyes telling about that her son had employment, and he was a child in this program. So it's really exciting work y'all are doing.